there's the same frustration here with a certain brand of establishment, transactional Democratic Party politics that people are really feeling, and that I think is motivating some of the very strong enthusiasm that I'm feeling for our campaign.
People have to realize, what the city was in, the condition it was in when I took office 3.5 years ago. And so that's why we're running for re-election. I have a great team in place. We have great momentum. And, I'm up for it. This is a tough job, but I'm certainly up for it and looking forward to a second term.
Well, those are the two leading candidates for the mayor of Seattle, Bruce Harrell, the incumbent, and Katie Wilson, talking with KUOW this week, as we are just a few days away from the August primary. What are the different visions they are sharing? What kind of city council would the winner of that race be working with? The city's getting closer to filling an unexpected vacancy on the council. That's actually seeing a new dynamic of district privileges emerging here as more council members carve out benefits for their individual districts. Plus, how many criminal cases are really rolling through the King County Prosecutor's Office? The answer may surprise you. And we're always full of surprises here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I am a host on the Seattle channel, and the views expressed here are mine. I'm with my friend and co-host, David Croman, the City Hall reporter for the Seattle Times. David, I am joining you from the wilds of Southern California and not in my usual studio here on a trip to see some family here. And I just wanted to ask, is there anything I can pick up while I'm here for you? Some extra traffic congestion, maybe some poor air quality? What do you think?
Well, you're sort of near Huntington Gardens, aren't you?
Yes.
Isn't that I love that. So you can, snag a cactus for me or something.
There you go. Yeah, I'll saw off some saguaro here, and we'll see if I can bring it on the plane.
One of those priceless bonsai trees.
Indeed. Just grab one up. I can't wait. All right, That's my plan. We'll see how that works. So thank you, David, for joining me. Thanks also to our background noise sponsor, City Grind Espresso on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks also to the patrons of the show. Linda, really appreciate how you're engaging with the show on Patreon. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. You too can be like Linda and be appreciated simply by becoming a podcast patron. Support levels start at just $5 a month. You get access to patrons first content. There's some coming your way soon on that, I promise you. Even your own decal. We answer your questions on the show too. Find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Also, you can find this podcast on Converge Media. The video version is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, we're going to get rolling with Right Here, Right Now. David, I wanted to turn our attention to the primary elections coming up on August 5th. They're always a little crazy in Seattle for me. So many candidates, so many races to cover. You very recently highlighted the top candidates for Seattle mayor, incumbent Bruce Harrell, challenger Katie Wilson, really the focus of your piece in the Seattle Times this week. And you put it as this age-old battle between consistency and change, which I definitely see. Harrell, of course, has been around City Hall since 2008 as a council member and a mayor, a brief break in there from 2020 to 2022. He's saying it's no time to have somebody new running the show with so many threats from the federal government. Then you've got Wilson saying, well, hey, I'm a longtime organizer with the Transit Riders Union. I know what's going on. And she's saying that Harrell is really emblematic of a flagging Democratic leadership that's not doing enough, which may be why we're dealing with a Trump White House in the first place. David, I always think this is interesting when we're dealing with a nonpartisan local race, but how much of that national level political discussion do you think is going to influence things here in Seattle?
I truly don't know, and I'm really looking forward to the primary to get a sense for how much of the kind of broader political climate finds its way into Seattle. I think there are kind of two ways of looking at this. There's the way that Katie Wilson hopes it will go, which is akin to what happened in New York, which is, Zohran Mamdani kind of surprised everybody by coming out on top. And I think there were a lot of nuances to that. But, that some of the broader themes that you could talk about is people kind of upset with institutional figures like Andrew Cuomo and, looking for someone new with a kind of more exciting voice. Andrew Cuomo has a lot more baggage than I think Bruce Harrell does. So there's a lot to talk about the difference between New York and here. But, she's hoping that it is nevertheless indicative of some kind of broader climate of being fed up with the establishment. And, she's painting Bruce Harrell as the establishment, which is fair. He is as establishment as it gets in Seattle. Yeah. Bruce Harrell is kind of trying to play this role of, protector of the city, saying he knows how to keep the city safe. He's been here long enough. He also is kind of betting that the messages that got him elected in 2021 will still resonate in 2025, which is, hey, you elected me for public safety, and now crime is looking better, and we're hiring more cops. So I'm doing what you put me here to do. So why would we change course? And so I think it really does. I think if the national climate comes into Seattle in a sort of realistic way, then it could be a close race.
Yeah.
If people feel similarly today as they did in 2021, as far as what they want in a mayor, it might not be that close of a race.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens here and what Joe Mallahan might do here. Again, more of a moderate candidate, might draw some votes away from Bruce Harrell. Rye Armstrong, definitely left of center, might draw some votes away from Katie Wilson. So we're watching those candidates too. But I just look at this battle between Wilson and Harrell, if indeed that is what comes through here. I just remember when NPI, the Northwest Progressive Institute, ran a poll back in May that showed Wilson actually leading Harrell by a 36 to 33% margin. How much stock do you put in numbers like that? I just really feel like this is going to be an uphill battle for Katie Wilson to try to unseat Bruce Harrell if indeed she gets through the primary here.
I don't put a lot of stock in that particular poll, if I'm being honest, because even the final number was like 30 to 33. So you've got a third of the electorate saying, I don't even know who these people are.
Yeah.
And that's after they were pushed to make a decision. They're still saying, I don't know who these people are. And these are people who are likely to vote, and they still don't really know who the candidates are. And, the way that poll was done is it was open, when it was first asked, it was something like 56% of the people hadn't made up their mind. So really what that poll told me is it's kind of a question mark where people will go. And the question for me is, that was at a point when there hadn't really been any sort of public debating or airing of each other's attack ads yet.
Right.
And since then, Harrell has really been trying to paint Wilson as a return to 2020. Essentially, they have been consistently linking to articles in which he's kind of expressed direct or indirect support for having fewer police in the Seattle Police Department.
Right.
Been trying to tie her to Shama Sawant, fairly or not. And so, that could have an impact. At the same time, Wilson has been hammering a lot harder on, hey, every frustration you have about Seattle happened when Bruce Harrell was in City Hall. And so why would we continue to put him there if you were unhappy with the way things are going? And so, how each of those attack lines takes hold, I think will also shift the race fairly significantly.
Agreed. Thank you for identifying all those different points. Again, get those ballots in, folks. We're not too far away from that August 5th primary. Want to make sure that people are getting out the vote. Sometimes difficult to do in a non-presidential year. So I want to make sure that people are doing that. I did want to look at a few other city council affairs this week. The 6 finalists to fill the role of interim D5 council member are speaking to the council. We've talked about this on the podcast for the past few weeks. I'm going to let this one simmer a little bit until we have a final candidate chosen, which should be next week. But David, I was very interested to see this series of presentations to the council's public safety committee on Tuesday morning about the county prosecutor, the county jail, the county court system. The presentation on the court especially jumped out to me, and the presenters themselves actually emphasized this, saying only 10% of the cases that the Superior Court takes on are criminal cases. There are so many more civil cases. Those take up 40% of the court's docket. Then probate and guardianship plus family law, that's another 30% there. What message do you glean from that, David, that the fact that all those criminal cases we see dominating the headlines only represent 1 out of 10 cases the Superior Court's actually dealing with?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. We at times have this kind of service where we get essentially at the end of every day a list of all the lawsuits that have been filed in King County Superior Court. And so you kind of, but from a visceral sense, I understand that there are like many being filed every day. There's a lot of personal injury cases. There are a lot of pro se cases, which is people who are representing themselves. And
yes,
it's a beautiful thing that anyone can make their case in open court and represent themselves. I imagine some of those are not entirely thought through and perhaps take up some time in the court system. But it doesn't exactly surprise me. 10% is lower than I would have guessed, though. That feels really small.
Yeah, yeah. It was just interesting to be because those criminal cases are definitely the ones that make the headlines and ones that I'm always looking at, and I know the council is looking at too. There was one other piece that I thought was interesting in this presentation about security inside and outside the courthouse. Definitely an issue during COVID. We saw some high-profile events there of jurors getting harassed and actually assaulted sometimes outside the courthouse. The courthouse gets about 1,400 people coming and going every day. They're open. More than 364,000 people per year coming in and out there. The report showed 125 disorderly conduct incidents or disturbances outside the courtroom, and then more than 1,400 protection escorts inside the courtroom. Again, this was a number that the presenters emphasized here. And I was just looking at this again for all the headlines about what might be going on outside the courtroom. It almost sounds like they have bigger issues inside. Did you get anything out of that?
Yeah, I mean, the question though, of security at the courthouse has
That's
been
real.
persistent. Um, Judge Donahue was kind of big, really, really hammering on this.
Yeah.
Uh, it is undeniable that the courthouse is situated in a place where there is a lot of street activity. It's a lot of people hanging around that area. I
Oh
bike
yeah.
past there when I'm on the way to City Hall. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it does kind of create a situation where there's these security concerns. And then, I mean, also when you're inside court, there's a lot of emotions
Oh yeah.
running high. So that is also not an entirely surprising number to me that you would have some blow-ups that would require security.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember too, when the city and county were talking about, okay, we're going to have the city take over City Hall Park again, that area just
Right.
to the south of the courthouse. And then it was like, nope, the county's taking it back. I mean, I think that's part of it too, making this whole campus secure. I know the city for a long time was talking about taking over that piece of it, but the county essentially grabbed it back as the way I looked at it. Can you talk about that piece of it? That City Hall Park piece, I think, is that interface you're talking about between a lot of people who might be unhoused, might have some different activities going on in their lives, and what's happening in the courthouse.
Yeah, and it goes to sort of, I think, sort of broader conversations around how do you make public spaces usable for the most people possible, because a beautiful thing about public spaces is anybody can use them, and that means anybody. And so it's not like we can pick and
Right.
choose who uses a park.
Yeah.
But there is also the reality that some people bring activity that make it more uncomfortable for a
Yeah.
majority of the people to be in that space, and how
Yeah.
you handle that. They've tried with City Hall Park these kind of activations. That's one
Yes.
approach, which is you make the space as lively as possible, and you basically push out the bad behavior with good behavior.
Right.
Um,
Right.
that location being where it is, it's not like there's a lot of other stuff around there, and so
Hmm.
maybe courtroom employees would want to eat lunch there, but it's not
Sure.
like you're seeking City Hall Park to like go spend your whole day and you need to
Yeah.
pack a
Right.
picnic
Right. Right. Right.
necessarily. And so, I don't know, the other side of the coin is security, and
Yeah.
that has the risk of making it just a totally unenjoyable place to be. So
Yeah.
I don't know where things stand actually with that park right now, but
Yeah.
it seems like that's a balancing act they have been trying to strike for years now.
A long time. I just thought it was an interesting thing for the Public Safety Committee to get into and learn a little bit more about. I certainly learned a lot from what the county was trying to present there. And I know there's a lot still ahead with that issue when it comes to security around the courthouse, too. All right. I did want to get to something important here, a resolution about a piece of tax legislation that really hasn't been completely written yet. What's this all about? We're discussing the council's work on an expected 0.1% sales tax hike, possibly in the mayor's budget, that would be intended for criminal justice purposes. We're going to do our best to break it down next on Now Hear This. Council President Sarah Nelson, as we reported a few weeks ago, is interested in the possibility of the mayor tacking on a 0.1% sales tax in his budget that would be used for criminal justice measures. This tax hike was approved by the state legislature in the session this year, does not require a public vote. So Council President Nelson, as we've reported, wants 25% of that money raised, which would be the total money raised would be about $37 to $40 million, according to council staff. She wants 25% of that to go towards addiction treatment options. Now, I asked the council's budget chair, Councilmember Dan Strauss, about this plan on Seattle Channel's Council Edition show last week. It sounded to me like he supports addiction treatment, but he was feeling like his toes were getting stepped on just a little bit. Take a listen.
I'm all for funding those important, what I consider medical services.
Sure, yeah.
That are treating addiction and substance use and their interaction with homelessness. Those things must be funded.
Right.
But she's not proposing a new revenue source. She's proposing new spending.
Okay.
While also not identifying where efficiencies or reductions are happening.
Okay.
But that's also because all of that is supposed to take place in the budget process.
Yeah. David, no secret here that Councilmember Strauss and Council President Nelson have been less than collegial over the past couple of months, let's say, especially after that makerspace proposal in Soto from Nelson that essentially dismantled the deal Strauss had with the Port of Seattle from a few years prior. But could you see Strauss trying to block this resolution somehow? It's on the docket for Council President Nelson's Governance Accountability Committee meeting on Thursday. And I'm wondering about this dynamic between these two.
Yeah, I don't know. I could imagine him blocking it because, like you said, those two are about as much oil and water as you could get on the city council, which is, I think, surprising to some people because it's not like their politics are like drastically different. They have disagreements, but it does feel personal, frankly, that they don't like each other very much. And so, yeah, I think he could do something like that. But you know, I think there is a point though to be made about like this proposal. There has been no sales tax proposal yet, and it might come, and it probably will come because it's pretty much free money for the mayor in a tight budget system, in a tight budget year. And I do think that the head of the budget, no matter who it is, tends to get a little frustrated because it's always a fight every year for people to get their priorities in the budget.
Right.
And so a lot of times we do see this, which is people offering proposals before the official budget season to kind of try and get their priority working before they actually have the bigger discussions.
Right. Is this Council President Nelson kind of forcing Councilmember Strauss's hand, or how do you look at what's going on here?
I think I don't know about forcing his hand, but it is trying to lay claim to a budget source that doesn't exist yet. And in so doing, sort of trying to get ahead, but, anticipating that it probably will exist at some point and trying to get ahead of that and lay claim to something before and sort of, create the narrative around that before there has been kind of a public discussion and therefore maybe increase the odds that her priorities get funded.
Yeah.
That said, it's an approach that Mayor Harrell has said he in principle agrees with. He hasn't signed off on exactly the numbers. And this idea of Seattle wanting to do more for treatment has buy-in from a pretty broad spectrum of people who provide these services. In the press conference when she announced this, you had Daniel Malone of TESC, which is kind of a pioneer in housing first.
Yep.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, we had Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle, which is a big proponent of housing and treatment with conditions, which is you have to do certain things. Those are very different ways of looking at it. And yet they were both there supporting this proposal. And so,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of politicking generally around this proposal, which is that it lays claim to something before there's an official proposal, which, I mean, I think she's just trying to get ahead of that proposal actually existing. And then, it's probably worth pointing out that we're 2 weeks out from a primary.
Right.
And there's no, I think Council President Nelson is a lock to get through the primary to the general election. But, talking to her, my sense is this is the first time she's run as an incumbent. And I think really is taking it very seriously and really wants to win again. And so I'm sure that's part of the calculations too, which is she's got this message. She feels pretty proud of the fact that she's brought together all these different providers to support this. And she didn't want to wait for the mayor to come out with a proposal before she can kind of get that message out there and before the primary. And so I'm sure that has something to do with it also. I haven't even, to be fair, I haven't even written a story about this in the Seattle Times because I was
kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, basically. Or
I was waiting for there to be an actual proposal to debate over how we spend that money, and that's
what makes this so weird. I'm looking at this resolution. It's like this could be possibly connected to that. It's tough. I mean, it's a little bit confusing. I'm not decrying the end goal or whatever else. It's just the method through which the resolution is presented is a little confusing.
Right. And I think that's why I haven't done a story, which is just I don't want to give the impression that this has been proposed, that this sales tax
Mm,
has actually been proposed yet.
yeah,
And I feel like saying Council President Nelson wants to send 25% of a tax that doesn't exist.
yeah,
It's just one too many steps for me. I really, again, I fully expect that the mayor's office will propose
yeah,
this tax.
yeah.
It would be surprising to me if they didn't, but it just seems like that is the time when we should be having the debate around how we spend that money.
Yeah, yeah, so interesting, and bringing in the fact that there's a primary happening right now, certainly a part of this story as well. David, thank you for breaking that down. That's been a interesting one for me to wrap my head around too. I did want to move on here. We mentioned the process to find a new council member for District 5 earlier in the show. I wanted to draw our attention to an interesting piece that I saw in the Urbanist about the dynamics of the council overall. So Ryan Packer wrote about the concept of district privileges, meaning individual district council members carving out resources for their district, which he is saying could make it more difficult to implement citywide programs. And I know we touched on this recently in the podcast, David, talking about district project funds for transportation, for example. Council members take control of about $1 million a year to go towards specifically district-focused projects. But overall, what did you think about this piece that Ryan wrote here? Do you see this dynamic of individual districts carrying more and more political power in Seattle government? Is that a good thing? What do you make of this?
Yeah, I thought it was a great piece. I think it's a good point, and certainly compared to when district systems were first introduced, there's a lot more talk about it.
Yeah.
I think we don't have any more leftover council members from before the district
Yeah,
system. So
right.
everybody who's there now has been elected as a district council member.
Mm-hmm.
It was mostly that. I'm sort of doing the math in my head. I think it was mostly that already, even before this council. But
Yeah.
we are solidly in an era of everyone has run for this office knowing it's a district position.
Right,
Um,
right.
I think there's certainly an increase in wanting to sort of show that you're good for your district in
Mm-hmm.
particular. Um, counterintuitively, I think that with everything going on at the federal government, I do think people want elected officials who are kind of fiercely local at the same time
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
They want to feel like they have somebody who's like really looking out for their specific interests, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably motivating some of it. Um, I don't want to overstate the scope here. We're talking about sort of a few $1 million that are sort of
Yeah.
being haggled over for
Mm-hmm.
specific projects in a,
Yeah.
you know, multi-billion-dollar context. So it's not an enormous amount of money, but I think he's right to point out that this didn't happen at all really before, and now it is happening. That people have kind of their pet projects in their district and they're fighting for money for it. And I think they're you can see both sides of it. The
Yeah.
benefit is you've got somebody who's directly accountable to their
Mm-hmm.
constituents and their districts, and they're sort of trying to bring home the bacon, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
flip side here is, pet projects, personal conflicts of interest, things like that.
Right. Yeah. And it's right. There's always council members have been doing this since long before the district process, carving out certain dollars or whatever else for priorities they wanted to. But I thought there was the interesting sort of crystallization for this whole topic for me was Councilmember Saka last year pushing for change on Delridge Way, really pushed the Department of Transportation last year to take out a median curb there. He really didn't like. Councilmember Morales, who was a council member at the time, was interested in a larger discussion about that. Is this safe? Is this a good idea? But then it basically turned into the budget chair, Strauss saying, well, you know what? District 6 isn't going to tell District 1 what to do. So it's
Right.
almost an issue of, I don't want other people to weigh in. I don't need other people to weigh in. This is my district. I guess that's the clash I see here potentially.
And it's this thing where, okay, so if there's a specific transportation project in your district that you feel like needs to be done, sure,
Yeah.
it's good to have some feet on the ground. You know that exists. You can
Yep.
advocate for it. But if it's this question of a sort of of a larger good, say traffic safety,
Sure.
say there's a finite amount of money for traffic safety,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes this kind of strange thing where maybe districts are competing directly for a
Yeah.
greater good. And
Right,
so when
right.
one district gets something, another district gets less of it. When in
Mm.
fact, if you were to look at the broader city, then like you kind of want just these resources to be distributed equally in the places that really need them,
Yeah, need it
rather
most.
than
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
place that has the best advocate or
Mhm.
most convincing advocate for their district.
So interesting. Yeah. Thank you for breaking that down. Again, a good piece in the Urbanist by Ryan Packer there. And A very interesting future, as always, for the district system in the city of Seattle. We'll have a few races happening over the next couple of years here. All right, coming up, the fallout of reducing federal funding for public broadcasting. Wanted to talk about this a little bit on What's Next. A look now at another national story that will have an impact locally here. The Trump administration's work to cut more than $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which goes to support NPR, PBS stations around the country. This isn't a future cut. It's a rescission, meaning taking money back that's already been given out. And David, what struck me about this was you got a big station in Seattle like KUOW. They held an emergency fundraiser. And guess what? Less than a day, they raised just about $1.5 million, covered what they were going to get reduced by at the federal level. So they're going to get through the year fine. But the thing that I think really strikes people is the smaller public radio stations in rural areas. I just don't see that kind of fundraising there. And I would imagine we're going to see some of these stations simply go away. Or what do you think happens here?
Yeah, that's always been the risk because, KUW, I think they get 5% of their budget from Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And they have
not
really
huge, but it's significant. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, they could lose all 5% of that and not ever get it back. And there would be cuts and it would be painful, but they would be fine. They would continue to go on. There would be layoffs probably, which of course we don't like, but they would continue as a station.
Yeah.
In the rural parts, we're talking 40% of their budget comes from Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And there is just not the kind of base of people to make up that gap. And that is why, frankly, I think there's actually a decent argument about whether or not a station like KUOW needed Corporation for Public Broadcasting funding, or if that was the original intent of that funding, because they have shown that they can be self-sustaining. They've got this big base of listeners.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
But when you look at the rural ones, that really was the purpose of Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is an acknowledgement that the sort of market capitalism side just doesn't work in those communities, and yet the resource is very important that they have it. And so the federal government is stepping in and saying, you know what, we think it's important that there is some kind of public dissemination service in this community. We know that the money isn't there to fund it internally, and so we are going to put money towards propping those up. It's not a political thing at all. In some ways, it's more public safety than anything. Community building. And so that really, I think, is the best argument for Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It's why Lisa Murkowski voted against it, because Alaska is the kind of prime example of a place that needs some kind of broadcasting system, but does not have the kind of fundraising base to create it. And so, that is what I fear. And, my kind of hope, I guess, in this is that you could maybe stations like KUOW or OPB or the kinds of places that are going to do fine with
could help the smaller guys.
Keep that fundraising going an extra day, and boot that money out to Yakima or wherever it might be, because that is going to be a big loss for those communities if those stations can't continue to provide services.
Go ahead. Keep going, please.
One other piece. And, I do worry about where I used to work,
that's right,
Cascade PBS, and formerly known as Crosscut, because they are losing about $3.5 million, and they don't have the kind of direct to consumer option that public radio does. If public radio has a pledge drive, you turn on your car or whatever, and there they are asking you for money. It's hard to
escape it sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to avoid, but that's good for their fundraising, because all right, I want to get back to hearing the news. I'll give you a little bit of money.
Right.
It's harder to do that when you're something like Crosscut. They don't call it Crosscut anymore, but Cascade PBS, where it's a click and it kind of, you can click out of it. It's easy to avoid. And so I do have some concerns about what that means for the future of my former colleagues at Cascade PBS, and I wish them well and hope people can kick some money their direction.
It just makes me wonder about where that conversation goes in the future. You've got a Trump administration saying this public broadcasting, it's fiscally bloated, it's politically biased. Then you've got Democrats like Patty Murray saying, well, okay, let's make some changes or whatever else, but why are we making this cut in the billions or $1 billion when we're at least the Trump budget, as I've seen it with the big beautiful bill, is giving tax breaks to wealthier people in our country with a budget deficit of trillions. So is it really saving money? That's Yeah, that's the part I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around for sure. Yeah, and I certainly wish the best for all our different public broadcasting colleagues because it's a difficult time. But I do need to wrap up with you, David, and I wanted to make sure I brought this point up because as much as we wring our hands often about the Mariners, you and I really have some hope because of the most recent visitors to town, the Milwaukee Brewers, who are on an absolute tear right now. I hear some of these names in the Brewer lineup, and I'm just like, who is that? I have no idea who they are, and they have the best record in baseball. That tells me the M's can do it too, or what does it tell you?
I go the opposite direction, which is the Brewers are not a big spending team, just like the Mariners, and yet they have shown that they can be a good and sustainable team in a way that Jerry Dipoto and the Mariners have not. So
yeah,
I think that further solidifies my view that we should move on from thank Jerry Dipoto for his services. And
indeed, I like it. David, thank you for always helping me bring it back to center because there's a lot more to be said there. Thank you, David. Thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to patrons who support the show. If you want to be a patron, go for it, man. Consider a pledge of $5 a month or more on Patreon to be a patron. You can hear this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks for watching on Converge Media, too. We'll see you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2000.